welcome to Your Mac Life for, what day is it? Wednesday, May the 1st. Happy birthday to my brother Chucky. I'm Shawn King, by the way, and joining me is my beautiful wife.
I'm Melissa King.
How you doing?
Good.
You have a good week?
Oh, a good week.
On tonight's show, as always, we'll talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. Talk to him about Apple's earnings report yesterday. It was very funny. Apple's earnings, they were down in iPhone sales. In China, they were brutal, 22% down in China. So iPhone revenue's down, but still the stock market went and lost its mind, and it was up $14 at one point today. Who understands the stock market? We'll talk to him about that. We're also going to talk to him about parental control. There was an interesting story last week. The New York Times reported that Apple had booted a bunch of apps off the store, off the App Store. The app developers obviously were upset by it. Apple said, no, it's because they were doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. And now some of the developers are coming back going, no, we were doing what you let us do. We'll talk to Jim about that. One of the problems is Apple's parental controls on the iPhone are woefully inadequate for any kind of what's called granular or specific controls. They're almost useless for a lot of people. And so the other apps were doing things that you could control your kid's iPhone from your iPhone. So you could see what they were doing. And that's okay, good for a parent.
That's
the problem
great.
is those apps are using software that Apple had said, no, you can't use that software. Even though it's available, Apple said you guys can't use that. So that was the problem. And because Apple hadn't cracked down on this stuff earlier. We'll talk to Jim about that. We're also going to talk about the right to repair. Apple just helped kill a bill in California that would mandate the company not prevent people from repairing their own iPhones or allowing third parties to repair them. We'll talk to Jim about that, whether or not there should be a right to repair. And then in our starting point photography segment, we're going to talk about, should I switch to mirrorless cameras? I got an email from someone saying they had an iPhone, they had an old DSLR, and they were looking at getting a new camera, and should they switch to the new mirrorless camera stuff? So we'll talk about that later on in the show. As you may have noticed, in homage to Game of Thrones, Melissa is dressed up as the Red Witch.
I know. Actually, kudos to the Red Witch.
Well,
I mean, wow.
We don't want
to
to ruin
rise
anything.
to the occasion. Oh, sorry.
Although I will say,
and I'm not dressed because of the Red Witch, but I can see your point.
I will say, because the importance of this final season, that if the show was on Sunday and you haven't watched it by Wednesday,
sorry, we're not going to be quiet now.
You're going to have to expect some spoilers. But what I want to talk about is the utter, unbelievable arrogance of the director of photography of that episode. Yeah. Did you see this story? This guy said, let me just pull the story up so I can where'd it go? Here's why Sunday's Game of Thrones episode was too dark. It was one of the issues that we had, was that it was hard to see. And
I was like, what the heck's going on? Why? Which dragon just got slashed? Where? It was awful.
It was difficult to follow the action. Now, granted, to a certain degree, that's good because it's a battle scene, and battles are chaotic, and you're not supposed to be able to see a lot of it.
No, it wasn't about that.
But it wasn't about that. The actual picture was very, very dark. I saw a lot of people complaining about it. A lot of folks suggesting, change your settings. A lot of us don't have our fancy TVs set properly. For example, we had it set to movie mode, and when I switched it to what's called dynamic mode, everything got a lot brighter. But that was the first time we'd ever noticed that. Mm-hmm. It's been on movie mode for everything up until Sunday night. So it's been fine up until then. But the director of photography of the episode literally said, I'm trying to find his name, D. Wagner or something or other. He told TMZ, I know it wasn't too dark because I shot it. And it turns out he made the conscious artistic decision to make it that dark. And that's fine if it's your personal art, but this is stuff that's meant for the consumer. It's meant for millions upon millions of people. And you made a decision to make this episode so dark people couldn't see much of the action for your artistic vision of what was supposed to happen, not for the viewing audience or the pleasure of the viewing audience. And I get what he's saying to a certain degree, because we've all seen movies where the characters are walking through the woods and it's perfectly well lit. Mm-hmm. There's no moon. It's, you can see everything. Right?
Yeah,
It's
I know. I understand that.
But in this case, he intentionally made this scene so dark that thousands, tens of thousands of people are complaining about it being too dark.
Yes.
And then the problem is when you change your settings on your TV, you get this banding of things because of compression algorithms and streaming and a whole bunch of other different things. And that didn't look good either. So you were sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. Either have it set the way they want you to watch it, in which case you can't see anything. There's a lot of times we're going, who was that? Who was that just got slashed?
Well, I fell into this awful apathy of going, well, I guess the Ice King created a really, really bad ice storm. And so I sat there thinking, I'll wait for it to be over, which is not the way I wanted to watch it. Yeah. I want to see the dragons. I don't want to try and figure out what's going on. And actually, the whole episode was, there's so many flaws in the whole episode.
The most fun I had was reading from military analysts and tacticians.
I'm not even like that, and I already know it was bad.
Exactly. About what Jon and Daenerys had planned were stupid.
It was dreadful.
It was just really bad.
I can't believe Jorah allowed it to happen.
And what that brings to my mind is that it means that the director of the episode never consulted a military tactician and said, "Hey, this is how we're planning on doing this. Would this make sense in this battle?"
I am so not a tactician. I mean, I used to play Stratego with my brother when I was a girl, and I never once won a game. Like, I'm just not strategic. Like, chess I can do, but I'm not. And I'm watching it with Shawn, and I'm going, why would they do that? They just sent those guys into oblivion, into a black hole. If they just got swallowed up, just like that.
Gone.
It was so bad, so bad.
And the dragons are sort of sitting around.
The dragons like,
go burn something. Okay?
Like, I'm pissed off because you're my sister. No, I'm pissed off because you're my brother. Or whatever, aunt, nephew. I don't know what they are. They're related. So just, oh my gosh. It was so embarrassing. We can't say this to Damon, by the way.
Oh, God, no.
Because he's going to divorce us.
Our stepson just refuses to talk to us about it now.
He's just not.
Because he's just so upset.
He's like, you guys just, oh my God, I'm leaving right now. I'm not going to talk to you guys about this.
He had the funniest line. He said, I'm not going to listen to people who can't do it better themselves.
Like,
dude, what are you kidding me?
You don't understand, Mom and Shawn. Oh my God, yeah, it was terrible. Really awful.
Dave D says, I can't binge. I have to get up to pee occasionally. I don't think Dave understands what binging means.
No, I don't.
You can pause it and go pee, dude.
Yeah.
Binging doesn't mean you got to sit there for 8 hours and pee yourself. You can get up and get a sandwich.
And I agree with Sherry. Like, Jon is just not a good... I mean, what Shawn said, someone told him how many battles has the guy lost.
3.
I mean, there was that one big battle that they did with... the guy, what was the guy that married Sansa? That was just like a dreadful, awful guy that his dog ate. His dog ate him.
Battle of the Bastards.
The Battle of the Bastards. It went fast and it was frenzied, but at least you could see it. At least you could think, right, okay. No, this was different to that. Yeah, this was. I cannot see. Thank you, Sherry Ramsey. I cannot see anything.
The other problem is that the characters, the actors of Jon and Daenerys are awful. They're just boring.
Separately, they're okay. Together, they're awful.
Well, as we talked about, I said separately they're okay when they're with other actors. That the other actors are good enough to carry them through the scenes.
Exactly.
Mormont and Tyrion.
Well, and Tyrion and
even Sansa are better actors, so they sort of distract away from how just dead the styles of Jon and Dany are. But when Jon and Dany are together, as Sherry says, there's zero chemistry.
Exactly.
As you said, there's more chemistry between Mormont and Dany than there is between Jon and Dany.
She loves him.
She does.
I think, I don't know who directed it to be so, but if she hears him walking into a room and she's got her back, you can see her go, like and he's a beautiful older man, like he's gorgeous. So I don't know, they should have had something happen there. He loves her. So.
Sherry Sansa and Tyrion forever.
Yes, I mean, I cannot wait to see Cersei again. Oh, bring
Isn't
on
that
Cersei!
awful?
I know, I want Cersei. When we saw the next one, I thought, oh yes, we're gonna get Cersei back.
This lying, incestuous biatch, and
Oh,
we
she's
can't wait to
amazing.
see her to come back on the show.
And then Sansa and Tyrion, I was ashamed of them in the crypt.
We're so just.
Well, you were the best of them. It's like, I was? Like, really? Like, talk to the people. They're sitting down there shivering in absolute fear.
Give them some sort of reason to live.
Oh, and then, they're hiding from everything. They weren't even trying to protect people.
Sherry, how did they not know what was going to happen in the crypt?
I know.
John saw the Night King raise the dead.
Yeah.
So let's put all the people who are the most vulnerable in
the crypt. I know. Like, he has seen what the Night King is capable of, and they still came up with that battle plan. Let's send all these guys in, and then he can raise them up again so they can fight us again.
Here's an idea. Send them away.
Away. We've got dragons.
Send them south, you dumbass.
Anyway, I'm so sad because we were all so anticipatory of this whole thing.
Well, that's the other thing, too. I said on Twitter the day after, it sounds weird, but not enough people died. Okay? Mm-hmm. They set it up so that characters, I'm not going to say who, but they set it up so that these characters were celebrating their last moments on this earth in various kinds of ways, having sex and drinking and doing the stuff you do.
Yeah.
And they didn't die.
Well, our dinner time conversation was, well, Lula's going to die.
Oh, yeah.
And then Lula's going to die. Oh, right, of course. And then they looked like they were dead for sure.
Yeah.
And we still are trying to think, how did they survive? They say, there she is again. Or who. I'm not going to worry about being a spoiler. It's Wednesday.
And Bran's big battle plan was, I'll just sit in this chair.
I'm just going to sit here.
I'll sit here.
I'm going now. I'm leaving now. And then Theon, where are you going?
Where are you going, you dick? I'm going to give my life up for you. At least you can hang around for it.
Where are you going? He didn't answer. He was just gone. And then he sent 8
Yeah, why do you send 15 ravens?
There's a whole murder of ravens, if that's what you call them, going off. Why didn't they do that before? In the very beginning.
And so he flies off, and they find the Night King, and doesn't tell anybody. He's here. He's over here. I found him.
No, it was very odd. Very disappointing. I mean, it's so sad that we're actually sitting here and we're making fun of it. So, Cersei, bring her on.
Folks, later on the show, we're going to talk about switching to a mirrorless camera. A listener sent an email. They've got an old DSLR and they've got an iPhone, but now they're thinking about getting a new camera, and they were asking about advice on mirrorless. We'll talk about the pros and cons of mirrorless cameras. But up next, we're going to talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple, The Loop, about Apple earnings, parental controls, right to repair, and whatever else pops up. All that and much more coming up. This is your Mac Life. Welcome back, folks. Thank you guys very much for joining me here this Wednesday evening, whether you're tuned in live or listening in on the archive. Now on our phone, we've got our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. Jim, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Apple had their earnings announcement yesterday. They, once again, made metric buttloads of money, but it wasn't all good news. Actually, there was quite a bit of bad news. What was your reaction to the earnings report?
I said before, any company that makes billions, how can that be a failure?
That's right. How can you say anything bad about a company that made like $58 billion?
Yeah, they had revenue of $58 billion. Now that was down 5%.
Yep.
But and when you even add a percent on billions is a lot of money.
Yeah, that's right.
But still, they had revenue in 3 months of $58 billion.
Yep.
That's a lot of money.
Apple has stopped breaking out the actual numbers of products they sold, but last quarter they sold $52 million. It's 52 million units in the year-ago quarter, and they posted pretty much the same amount. So you can kind of assume around 50 million iPhones were sold last quarter. And that's still a remarkable number. We keep talking about, or the Wall Street keeps talking about market saturation. Everyone who wants, in the developed world anyway, everyone who wants an iPhone has an iPhone. And the only market share gains that are possible are taking them from Android, is having people switch from Android to iPhone. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's still amazing they can still, in this supposed saturated market, sell 50 million iPhones in 3 months.
3 months. Yeah.
The thing that surprised me the most, and folks, if you get a chance, head on over to sixcolors.com. Jason Snell's done a great job on really breaking out the numbers in easy-to-digest graph form. And one of his first graphs is Apple quarterly revenue by category. The iPhone's dropped to 54%, but still more than half of the company's revenue is made up from the iPhone. The interesting thing is how big services have gotten. It's 20% of the company, bigger than the Mac and the iPad combined, or Mac and even others, the wearables combined. Does that surprise you that services has taken over so much of the company in such a short period of time?
No, because don't forget, they put a lot of effort into this over the past few years, and they said a few years back that is their focus.
Yeah.
So, and also remember that typically services are recurring charge.
Yes.
So it's not a one-time payment; it's a monthly payment.
That's an excellent point to make, because it lets Apple almost bank on those billions and billions of dollars from quarter to quarter. iPhone revenue may go up and down, Mac may go up and down, but you're almost guaranteed within a few percentage points that your services revenue is going to be, if nothing else, at least stay the same and certainly continue to increase. Somebody wrote a story that Apple is no longer an iPhone company, they're a services company. Do you agree with that?
No, not yet.
No.
Now, if you want to break out the services as a company and give it to me, I'm good with that. I'm good. Total. Give me a percentage of it, and I'll be good with
Yeah,
but
be perfectly happy.
No, not yet. They're not a services company yet. They're still a hardware company.
And there's still
nothing wrong with that.
Oh, absolutely not. And they're still an iPhone company, because the vast majority of those services are coming from the iPhone, or devices that connect to the iPhone, AirPod and Watch and Apple Music and those kinds of things. So if Apple's going to continue to have services grow, it's got to grow in hand with the iPhone. Don't you agree with that?
Well, it depends on what they do in the future, and we don't know what their plans are in the future. But for instance, the video category will most likely be watched at home.
Yes.
So that's an Apple TV thing, but it's still hardware, and it's still something that they're going to rely on. But they're going to push their a lot of stuff onto TVs, so you may not even need Apple hardware.
Yeah.
So it's at that point where they start thinking more services as opposed to Apple hardware. Right now, it's still focused on Apple hardware.
Tim Cook said something that went mostly unnoticed, that Apple can and will coexist with Netflix. A lot of folks, for some bizarre reason, seem to think that Apple needs to beat Netflix. But Tim Cook was very clear when he said that we think that most users are going to get multiple over-the-top products, and we're going to do our best to convince them that the Apple TV Apple TV Plus product should be one of them. I think that's the clearest sign that Apple has said they're not in the Netflix killing business. They're in their own Apple TV Plus business. If you have Netflix, Apple's happy for you, but they want you to buy Apple TV Plus, not replace Netflix, but add it on top of Netflix. Do you agree with that?
I don't know why people are thinking that Apple has to kill one of the other network streaming services in order for them to succeed. They don't. But the difficulty, and we've talked about this before, is what Apple has to do is get people to buy theirs.
Yes.
And that could be a tricky thing. Now, and this is where all of the our talk about successful shows comes in, because Apple doesn't want to kill off Hulu, and they don't want to kill off Amazon, and they don't want to kill off Netflix, but they want people to buy theirs, and that's how they're going to do it. They're going to do it by successful shows. If they don't have successful shows that the mass public wants to watch, then nobody's going to buy it.
No.
I mean, it doesn't get any more simple than that. That's it. You know, if they do have successful shows and, you know, they have 2 or 3 of them on there or more, then people are going to buy Apple TV Plus, and they're going to watch those shows, and Apple's going to make another gazillion dollars. But I think that Netflix is going to be stable no matter what, because they have all the other content.
Yes.
And they have originals. So then you have Hulu and Amazon, and, you know, they have original shows. And I think that's really what people are going for here, are those original shows.
We've talked about this before, and I mentioned this in the story I posted on The Loop yesterday. If Apple Insider says, if Apple wants to get serious with Apple TV Plus, shedding the clean image would be a good start. Do you agree with Apple Insider on that? That they can't just do G-rated content?
I mean, Apple is going to do G-rated content. That's I think that's what they're going to do.
You think solely G-rated?
For now, I do. Yeah. But in a lot of ways, I agree. And I've said before, I want shows that, you know, it's not gratuitous swearing or anything like that, but it's HBO type. It's, you know, Hulu original type. It's, you know, where it fits in a scene or in a show, then it's there because, you know, this is real life, you know, and this is The Sopranos. Can you imagine a gang of mobsters not at swearing at the titty bar? You know, I mean, that's just what they do. And so, yeah, I guess if they stay away from those types of shows and not have gangsters and not have, you know, anybody that's really upset, but you can't have, you know, a gangster really upset and say, "Oh gosh, darn it."
That's right. The Apple Insider piece had an interesting statement. They said that given the firmly established platforms available elsewhere, if Apple keeps a tight grip on the creative reins, mercenary stars will stay for the money, but creative-oriented ones may look elsewhere. I guess the point they're trying to say is that those people, those creatives who want the freedom to produce whatever they want to produce won't go to Apple, and therefore Apple Insider's arguing that the overall quality level at Apple TV will drop to just bland G-rated content.
That could be.
I don't know if that's true because TV is generally G or PG rated. And
what's happening with TV now?
It's certainly fragmenting into the broadcast networks and the cable. That's for sure.
That's for sure. And who has the most popular shows?
It depends on how you define popularity. If you're looking at ratings, you're looking, the highest rated shows are still on broadcast TV simply because more people have broadcast TV than have HBO or other cable channels.
But the best shows on TV are not on broadcast.
Define best. I mean, the number one rated show across all platforms is Big Bang Theory.
Stop lying to me.
I'm not lying to you. More people watch Big Bang Theory than watch any other show, including Game of Thrones.
Well, okay. I think you're probably right then that is because more people have broadcast TV.
Yeah.
But let's look at, the quality of shows. Big Bang Theory, really. God. I just thought about like trying to jump off the table.
Really? You're not a Big Bang Theory fan?
I used to like that show, but to say it's the most popular show, that just seems crazy.
Sure. It depends on how you define popularity, but the only real way we have of doing that is through ratings, and it's the number one rated show.
So if I look at, The Sopranos. I've never watched a Game of Thrones ever.
Okay.
You look at shows like Breaking Bad and, Weeds and all of these shows, they're all on cable networks, not on broadcast.
Yep.
And then you look at some of the other ones that are on, Hulu and Netflix, and some of those are top-notch shows. I mean, God, those are good. There's a lot of great ones on there. So that's what I would like Apple to make. If Apple wants to be in the broadcast business, then I think that their customers are going to expect something different than what they're going to deliver.
I think it's going to be hard for Apple to get the critically acclaimed shows in a G-rated platform. I think it's because a lot of people don't respect Big Bang Theory, and it's complete eye candy. I have no problem with anyone who doesn't like Big Bang Theory. It's not The Sopranos. It's not it's not Game of Thrones. It's not at that quality level, but it's entertainment. It's entertaining. You have to agree with that. But,
sure, yeah.
But there's a lot of shows that are on broadcast TV that are popular in any way of describing them. I'm looking at the list now. The Good Doctor, Grey's Anatomy, Will and Grace, Empire, The Voice, Survivor.
I don't like a single show you've listed.
You're right. I don't like any of them except Young Sheldon and Big Bang Theory. So is that a demographic thing? Is that an age thing? Who knows? I think Apple's going to find their niche with Apple TV Plus. It's not going to be a Netflix killer. The biggest thing for Apple, I think, is going to be price point. And I had a discussion with Gruber on Twitter yesterday about this. He said that someone said that Apple TV Plus was going to be free, that if you had an iOS device, you could get Apple TV Plus. And I said, John, I hope you didn't say that, because that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. There is no way Apple is going to make Apple TV Plus free.
Well, they could for a while.
I think they may offer you that 1 month free subscription, or 3 months like they did with Apple Music off the top. But over time, you're going to pay for Apple TV Plus, whether that's a subscription bundle, if you want it as a standalone item, and because you don't have Apple Music or iCloud or whatever they're going to do, you're going to pay, and probably around $20 a month for it, I think.
I don't know. I don't know if it'll be that much.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
Because Apple generally goes for the higher pay stuff. They might lower the price later because it's the old saw that you can always lower prices. It's hard to raise prices, as Netflix is finding out.
Yeah, I can't imagine that it can be that high.
You don't. So what number do you think? Are you looking at it closer to the Disney $7 a month thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. Apple historically has charged more. I don't want to say overcharged, but certainly charged more for the same or similar products to other people.
They don't have the content to back that up, though.
True. But
so I just don't think that they can do it.
Okay. Sometime in the fall, we're going to find out one way or the other. It's going to be interesting to see where Apple ends up on that spectrum of Netflix at the top, say, and then Disney at the bottom. Tim Cook made some interesting statements about China as well. Last quarter, Apple was down 27% in China. They've sort of bounced back. They were only down 22% this quarter. He did make the point, though, that what did they call them? They called them. They never actually said they lowered prices in China in order to goose the market, but that was pretty much the tone of what he said. Apple historically hasn't done this. They haven't played around with pricing in order to gain market share. They did it in India and they did it in China, the two biggest developing markets in the world. Do you see Apple doing that in North America?
I don't think that they need to goose the market in North America.
No.
China's a completely different animal here, and it's one that Apple doesn't have a lot of control over, so it has to do something. I don't blame them for trying to goose the sales over there. If it helped by 5%, that's probably billions of dollars that it helped. Yeah. So yeah, I don't mind that at all. Because they have to do something.
I think the only reason why Apple would drop the price on new iPhones in North America would be to get people who haven't upgraded yet to upgrade. Cook mentioned, I don't even think that's going to work because Cook's already mentioned the trade-in program that Apple has and the installment plan that Apple has that is not available here in Canada. Because if it was, I'd upgrade every single year if I could get an installment plan from our local cell phone provider like our friends in the U.S. have. That really encourages folks who want a new iPhone every year to get one. And I think that's the only reason why Apple would drop the price of new iPhones was to get folks who are still on, say, an iPhone 7 or even 6 and below to say, hey, I'll get a new iPhone this September or this next cycle.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing, but you have to be able to look at everything that Apple has to look at around the world and say, well, China's huge for us when they're going. We're making tons of money, and they're not going right now.
Yeah, that's right.
So, how much can we cut our margins back?
They have to. I mean, it is the second most important market for Apple. It's going to be, within 5 years, the single most important market for Apple, followed closely by India in the third spot behind the U.S. So they've got to maintain that value of the iPhone, that desire of the iPhone. If that means dropping the price a little bit so they sell more, the old make it up in volume thing, I think Apple's going to do that every day of the week. They have to.
They have to.
Another little interesting tidbit that both Cook and Luca Mastro, the CFO, mentioned on the call was that there were component constraints, air quotes. That's why they couldn't sell as many iMacs as they wanted to. That's pointing a direct finger. It's got to be at Intel, isn't it?
Well, you would almost think so, but I can't think of anything else component-wise that's in there in the new iMac that would cause that type of delay.
No.
Bluetooth chips, I can't imagine. Wi-Fi, can't imagine. RAM, can't imagine.
No.
You can walk down the street in Silicon Valley and kick Wi-Fi chips as you walk. I mean, they're just everywhere. So there's nothing else that really seems to make any sense. And Intel's having some trouble.
Yeah, they are. And not just in chips. Obviously, the 5G modem business that they just got out of. Does this mean that this will spur Apple on to the mythical ARM chip for Mac sometime in the near future? Gruber seems to think it's going to happen at this WWDC coming up in June.
Yeah, and it's funny you say mythical. The first thing that I thought of is it's not mythical.
Yeah,
You know,
the Apple has an ARM chip based Macintosh in their labs as we speak today. I
yeah,
guarantee you.
guaranteed.
But when will that chip become available? I think that's the big question. No, obviously we don't know anything about when Apple's going to bring these chips to market. But if Intel continues on this, if another 3 quarters go by, or another 3 months go by, 6 months go by, and Intel can't give Apple those chips they need fast enough, I think this might have been just a quarterly glitch. We'll see at the end of the next quarter where the Apple reports the same thing, that supply constraints on parts caused them not to be able to sell as many iMacs as they wanted to. That's why I don't think we're going to see ARM-based Macs at this WWDC, because Apple's going to cut Intel some slack for the time period. But I think by next WWDC 2020, we will see some form of an ARM processor chip in a Macintosh on that stage.
That I don't know if I'd be surprised to see it at any time, but we talked about it before, and I think it all comes down to software.
True.
When and how are they going to make that software move?
And not only from a software point of view, but from a speed point of view, there's no way Apple could bring out an ARM chip that's slower than the Intel chip that's available at that time as well, too. Everyone's going to benchmark the hell out of this thing, and if those benchmarks come up as slower than Intel, the tech media is going to lose their shit and rip Apple a new one, and so will consumers.
And as they should.
Yeah. I think that would be a fair thing. I think that's the main issue. I think that Apple has the design chops to create this, again, mythical 7-nanometer ARM chip, but can it do what Apple is doing with the Intel chips today, and will it be the future for Apple? I think, yes, it'll be the future. I don't know that it's going to be ready in time for WWDC 2019.
That might not be ready this year, but there's a lot that goes into that, and I still maintain that software is going to be the most important aspect of it. Yep, they can make the chip, but can they port the software?
Yep. There was an interesting story from Motherboard today with an update. Apple is telling lawmakers people will hurt themselves as they try to fix iPhones. Apple is fighting on multiple fronts the right to repair movement, saying that consumers shouldn't have the right, however that's defined, to repair their own devices. And what Apple did, according to Motherboard, was that some lobbyists went to California lawmakers and showed them the dangers of an average person, an average user, repairing or trying to repair their iPhone, probably doing a demonstration of what can happen if you puncture a lithium-ion battery. Do you think it's fair of Apple to do this? Do you think that these concerns of Apple are overblown, or is this a valid concern of the company?
You and I are in opposite sides of this argument. So, no, I don't think it's unfair that Apple do it, because I can tell you right now that there's going to be some moron out there who punctures the battery and sues the shit out of Apple because something happened.
Couldn't Apple protect themselves, though, by putting in the end-user licensing agreement? Do not try to repair this yourselves. If you do, you can't sue us.
And do you think that that's going to hold up? No. Again, there's going to be some moron somewhere that's going to do it, or a moron that unfortunately had a child, and the child's going to do it, and they're going to sue the shit out of Apple. And I think that's wrong, because there are professional places that you can take it and get it fixed. And
that's true, and the vast majority of users will do exactly that. But the right to repair movement applies to those third-party guys as well. What this is saying that nobody can repair an iPhone unless it's through Apple's authorized process. What the right to repair is saying, no, I don't want to have to go to my local Apple store. I want to go to Jim's iPhone repair shop down in the mall and have him fix it for us.
Yeah, and Jim's going to puncture your battery, give it back to you, and then you're going to sue Apple because you said it was okay for Jim to fix it. No, it's not okay for Jim to fix it because all the tools Jim has is a hammer and an awl.
Go ahead.
All these people are going to try and either fix it themselves or take it to some moron who already broke 10 of them to fix it themselves. And it's just going to come back to Apple as being Apple's problem. And the tech press is going to go crazy on it. And no.
Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of iPhones have been repaired, legally and illegally, both by average everyday consumers. Sherry just said, I replaced the battery in my iPhone 6 Plus. I would never do it, but good for Sherry being able to do it. You can go into Jim's third-party Apple repair, and they do it, and there have been 0 reports of lithium-ion batteries exploding in the hands of someone during a repair. I think this is an overblown concern by Apple trying to do an end run around the process.
You only need one. That's all it takes is one.
But it hasn't happened.
Okay, let's say that it does happen. Some guy sitting at home decides he's going to do his, and it hurts him somehow. What then? What's going to happen. It's going to be all over the press. Oh my God, Apple's products are dangerous, and we got to boycott Apple, and they blew off my fingers, and now I can't do anything, and it's all Apple's fault, and I need to sue now. So I'm going to Texas to sue. Because that one person is a moron. Shouldn't have even had a screwdriver in his hand. Did, and look what happened.
I don't think we can protect people from being morons.
No, but as a company, you can protect yourself from being sued by a moron.
Let's move on. This was an
good choice.
This is an interesting story, and maybe a little bit too inside baseball, but I found it interesting. So the Galaxy Fold is a piece of crap. We can all agree on that. All the reviewers said the thing breaks. It's not a good phone. Wow. iFixit did their traditional teardown of the Galaxy Fold. They found it was also, unsurprisingly, a piece of crap on Wednesday. On Thursday, iFixit pulled their teardown because the person who gave them the Galaxy Fold to tear apart apparently heard from Samsung in some sort of way and asked iFixit, pretty please, would you take down this article, this report? Perfectly valid article. There's nothing wrong with the article. The article was not incorrect. It was not factually wrong. There was nothing wrong with it. It was a valid article.
Yes.
If I put you in charge of iFixit, would you have pulled the article?
Well, there's a couple of different things going on here. One, iFixit would not have gotten in any trouble at all.
No.
But they would have screwed that person who gave it to them. And I think it was more of a pretty please from that person than Samsung.
I don't think Samsung knows who gave iFixit the device. I think
I didn't see the pictures, but if there's any kind of number on there, they would know.
True. If there's any kind, then that's something you could look at, because for some bizarre reason, Samsung, the guy who gave iFixit the phone, and iFixit don't know what the Wayback Machine is. The article has not been pulled from the internet; it's been pulled from iFixit's website, but it's easy to find the entire article on the internet Wayback Machine. Pulling the article did nothing except make iFixit look silly from any journalistic point of view, and I understand that they're not journalists, so they shouldn't be held to that same standard. But no one else was asked to pull any negative article, so it wasn't that wasn't the reason why iFixit pulled it.
It was because of this article. It was because of the person.
Because of the person who gave it to them. And I think the person was worried that Samsung was going to find out about it.
Right. Yeah.
Because what iFixit said was they're trying to protect this person so they can get more stuff from this person at some point in the future.
Right. And that, to me, that's just, I don't like it.
Monty says, I respect iFixit for taking it down until they can buy a device with their own money and not doing a phone that was a review unit. It wasn't a review unit, though. That's the thing. It wasn't a unit that had been given away as a review unit, because all those came back. And Jim, you know this, you can confirm this. When you get a review unit, it says in your NDA, don't take this apart.
Yeah, and you give it back by this date.
Exactly. And you give it back to us in whole. You don't give it back to us in bits and pieces. You're not allowed to take apart review units. That's just standard operating procedure. Whenever you get a review unit from any company, that the NDA says, don't disassemble this. You have to send it back to us in perfectly good working order, or you're buying it from us.
iFixit was so hungry for the headline and the teardown that they did something that, maybe they shouldn't have done. It depends on how you look at this. But that's what they were hungry for. They got it, and then they had to take it down, put the phone back together, and get it back to whoever it was that sent it to them.
I don't think, from looking at the iFixit teardown, that they can put the phone back. The way iFixit tears stuff up is it's probably pretty destroyed, probably unusable. So I think
so there's a good repair shop to go to.
I think the point was taking the article down as opposed to giving the phone back, because, like I said, it makes no difference that you took the article down. It literally makes no difference. Everyone else's article. It's not like this was secret information. Everyone else knew this thing was a piece of crap.
Yeah.
So,
no, I agree with you, but they were hungry for something. Yep. They got what they wanted, but then some shit fell on somebody.
Yeah, and as to Monty's second point, I respect iFixit for taking it down until they can buy a device with their own money. That's what they should have done to begin with. Like you said, they were hungry for the story. They found a source for the product, and they posted it with both the guy who gave it to them not realizing it, and iFixit themselves not realizing you could get in trouble for this kind of stuff. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time.
Somebody realized it.
I would have left the story up.
I would have sent the phone back in pieces.
I think that's a given. I think it's definitely a given. The story broke last weekend that Apple has booted a bunch of apps off of the App Store. I posted a story about this, the New York Times article, and a rebuttal from one of the app developers up on the Loop at loopinsight.com. Our friend Rich Mogul, who is my favorite security guy, says, quick note on parental control apps using mobile device management features. That's the ability to remotely control an iPhone. He says, I understand why Apple is cracking down. I don't understand why they let this go on for years in the open and are only now restricting it. This kind of inconsistency hurts creators and doesn't look good. What are your thoughts on Apple pulling these apps?
Okay, so I understand why they're pulling them. Apple said in their statement or in Schiller's email that they first learned about the risks in 2017 and started to investigate.
Yep.
Now, I think the fact that they spent so long investigating and looking at the dangers of MDM that, if they thought it was unsafe, they're going to pull it.
Yeah.
And they made that clear. Dave told me about an article on TechCrunch last December where they talked about this.
I linked to that article in my story on the Loop. Yeah, it's been at least that long since Apple's been warning developers, don't use these APIs. These are not APIs that are open to developers to use, and these guys continued to use them.
Right. Now, the first piece that came out And the New York Times piece, I read it and I thought, oh my God, this is awful. And then, when I read Schiller's email, I looked back at the Times piece, and the part that bothered me the most about the Times piece was that they did not include Apple's full statement.
No.
No, you can't. No, you can't do that. If you ask for a statement, well, you can, but it puts everything else, in my opinion, it puts it all in jeopardy.
Yeah.
You can even add a piece at the bottom to say, here is Apple's full statement. Anything you want. But if a company gives you a statement with relevant facts and you don't put those facts in your story because they don't match what you want, then you're just a jackass.
The other aspect of this that I find interesting is the fact that Schiller responded to an email from I think it's Mac Rumors reader. Then the next day, over the weekend, they posted up a press release about the New York Times article on Apple's website in their newsroom. So Apple's taking this very seriously. This is not one of the many, many stories we see where Apple just blows things off and says, you see in the story, Apple has no comment on this. This is something they took seriously enough to respond to it over the weekend. But it also brings up the question of Apple is, as I said off the top of the show, their parental controls are woefully inadequate. They're not very good. They're just not as I hate using the word, but I kind of have to here. They're not as granular as many parents would like. Apple has the right to have whatever apps it wants on its phone be on its phone. But parents have the right to protect their children from the bad stuff on the internet. And Apple should be the one. They should be leading the charge on this when it comes to privacy and data integrity of children. And yet they're not. So these other companies have stepped in and done something that they're probably not allowed to do, but they're very popular apps because they do the things that parents want to do on their phone.
Don't disagree with you there. Now, what I will say is that since Apple has been investigating this problem, this is actually a two-step thing. Apple has been investigating this problem, and since 2017, the parental controls have gotten better. I expect that they will get even better in the next year or so. And look at what Apple does with apps. I mean, it's not cutting out apps that compete with Apple apps. There are plenty of Notes apps out there that are better than Apple's Notes app.
Yep.
But Apple gives the basics of what you can do with an app, and then lets developers take it from there. I have a feeling that's what they did with parental apps, parental controls, until they realized what was going on.
Yeah.
And they were using these MDM profiles. Then they said, holy shit, no, you can't do that because that's not secure and it's not safe. So I would suspect that Apple will come up with some ways to allow these apps to continue and to make their own parental controls better.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's why it went on for years. Because the same way that, Notes apps are in the App Store and are better than Apple's, they're not kicking them out. They're just saying, yeah, well, here's a basic Note app. You don't have to buy one if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But if you do, well, here are some Notes apps, and they're great. They're better than what we make. They don't hide that. But I think this parental control thing may have taken them a bit off guard.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, no, we researched it. We know what you're doing, and you cannot do that.
I think one of the issues is, as somebody pointed out on The Loop, the problem is the solution for child monitoring and control is an inherently invasive product requirement. Parents want to be able to view, track, block their kids' access, which looks the same as corporate MDM because the requirements are the same, just that the end users are different. There's nothing inherently wrong with the requirement, but it can, like all tools, be used for good or ill. Keeping control of corporate devices or monitoring your 10-year-old is different than doing it to your wife, adult daughter. That's the problem that Apple has, is that these tools, which are meant to be used for enterprise control, can be used for parent, but they can also be misused by people who are tracking their wife or watching their adult children's phones or those kind of things. Apple's got to find a balance, and they don't feel these apps are doing that in a way that's secure, the way Apple wants them to be secure.
I agree.
It's a shame because I really would very much like Apple to have better parental controls, even if it's an MDM system that only Apple uses, that's blocked off for everybody else. I'd still like to be able to have more control over my 13-year-old son's iPhone. That's for sure.
Sure. I don't disagree, but.
Folks, been talking to Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. He has his own podcast called The Dalrymple Report. It's up on the iTunes store. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Shawn.
Talk to you next week, buddy. See ya.
Bye.
Later, in our next segment, we're going to talk about, in Starting Point Photography segment, we're going to talk about mirrorless cameras. A listener wrote in asking a question. They've got an old DSLR and they've got a new-ish iPhone. Interested in mirrorless cameras. Should they get one? We'll talk about the pros and cons of mirrorless cameras coming up in our next segment. All that and hopefully much more. This is Your Mac Life. Welcome back. This is Your Mac Life, the Starting Point Photography segment. Thank you guys very much for joining us here this Wednesday evening, or if you're tuned in live or the archive. The archive. That's the other thing. The archive. We got an email from a listener who was asking about mirrorless cameras. They've got an old Nikon D50, my first camera, DSLR camera, by the way, and they're interested in a new camera. They've got an iPhone, but they want more control over their photography. They want some of the things that we've talked about they're interested in. So they were looking at getting a mirrorless camera. They wanted to know my advice, pro and con, about whether or not they should get a mirrorless camera.
Why?
We practiced this! You were here for rehearsal!
What is the difference between a mirrorless and a mirror camera? What's the... Well, okay, sorry.
It's not the question you're supposed to ask. What's the question you're supposed to ask?
Why would I get a mirrorless camera is my question.
What's a mirrorless camera?
Oh, well, that's why I asked you about that film footage.
That's the question you were going to ask me.
Oh, what's a mirrorless? What is a mirrorless... I'm sorry, what's a mirrorless camera?
Goofball, jeez.
What is a mirrorless camera? And you explained it to me, but...
A camera? It's a camera without a mirror. Now, the next... No, I'm teasing. Where's my camera? Okay, so here is a typical DSLR, digital single lens reflex camera. This technology, except for the digital bits, is pretty much the same as it's been for 50, 60 years. What happens is light comes into the lens, it hits a mirror, a literal mirror here. The sensor is back here. The film on a film camera would be back here, and there's a mirror in the middle between the lens and the sensor on the back, or the film on the back. There's a mirror, and that mirror bounces light up to what's called a pentaprism, and there's another mirror-like device, a 5-sided mirror up here in the top. And the light bounces around in there and comes out through the viewfinder. So the viewfinder on a DSLR is called an optical viewfinder, so, because what that means is that you're seeing what the lens sees.
So I have a question.
Certainly, you shoot.
When you use the term DSLR, does that mean mirror?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Digital single lens reflex, they're all mirrored cameras. They all have mirrors in them. And so that mirror allows you to see what the lens sees through the back. Not on the screen on the back. The screen is a representation of the mirror. That's the exact thing that your camera is seeing is through the optical viewfinder. That make sense?
With the mirror.
With the mirror. So manufacturers a few years ago just decided to remove the mirror. And that's why mirrorless cameras are about half the thickness, and therefore not half the weight, but a lot less weight, because the body of the camera no longer has to have this mirror assembly. That sound you hear when a camera fires off, I think you can hear that. That sound, part of that sound, the beginning of that sound is the mirror flipping up out of the way to allow the light to come in and hit the sensor at the back of the camera, or again, film in that case. And then that's the other sound is the mirror coming back down. There's three sounds in there. There's the mirror moving up, there's the shutter opening and closing, and then the mirror moving back down. The downside of one of the downsides of a mirrored camera is if you at slow shutter speeds at 2 seconds, at 5 seconds, that action of that mirror moving up and then back down again can move the camera, can shake the camera.
Even on a tripod?
Even on a tripod. Less on a tripod, but certainly no tripod will hold it rock solid steady. It'll still jerk just imperceptibly to our eyes, but it might introduce blur in your shot. So a lot of cameras, the higher end the camera you get, the more likely you're going to have this feature. I've got a feature on this full frame DSLR. It's called mirror lockup. So when I push the shutter, the mirror moves up out of the way and waits for 2 seconds to allow the camera to stop shaking, and then it will take the picture.
Oh, so that answers my next question is, do you have an option on a DSLR to stop your mirror option?
Exactly. Yeah. To have the mirror move up, stop, wait for a period of time, take the picture, and then move back down again.
And do you still get the advantage of having a mirror with that option?
The advantage of having a mirror is the optical viewfinder is that you're seeing what the lens sees. So that's an advantage. But it's also a disadvantage. We'll talk about that in a bit. So mirrorless cameras don't have that mirror. So they don't have the optical viewfinder. In a mirrorless camera, light still comes to the lens, obviously. There is no mirror there, so it goes straight to the back of the camera and hits the sensor. What you're seeing through the viewfinder is not an optical viewfinder, but it's called an electronic viewfinder. You're seeing a representation of what's going through the lens. The sensor is sending that information to a little teeny tiny little television screen back here, and also to a bigger television screen on the back of your lens. So when you're looking at the screen on the back of your camera, on a mirrorless camera, you're not seeing what the lens sees, you're seeing what the sensor sees. And that may not seem like a big difference, but it can make a difference. So you're looking through a little tiny TV screen and a little tiny TV screen here. That sounds good, doesn't it? Except that's where most of your battery usage comes from. Mirrorless cameras generally suck up a lot more battery life than a mirrored camera. This camera, I've got 3 batteries for it. I can go a whole weekend on one charge on one battery, depending on how much I'm shooting. My mirrorless cameras, the Olympus M1, I couldn't go a full day shooting. I needed 2 or 3 batteries that day sometimes, because your camera is creating this image, this little TV screen, and that uses up a lot more battery on both of those lenses. Both those little tiny screens. So the most noticeable difference of a mirrorless camera versus a full-size DSLR is the physical size of it. And that can be good or bad. Mirrorless cameras, because they're thinner, can also be not only narrower body-wise, but narrower width-wise. Width, I guess? Mm-hmm. And that, can be good or bad. If you've got a certain size hand, I don't want to say big hand or small hand, a DSLR may be too big, but a mirrorless may be too small as well. The M1 I found it to be very, very tiny. I found it to be a little cramped. And I didn't like shooting with it. It didn't feel solid. It was so small. It was a little bit bigger than a point-and-shoot camera. It felt very, very light. And I couldn't hold the camera the way I'm used to. I hold my camera, I put the camera in the palm of my hand, and my shooting hand, my right hand in my case, is over here where I can get hold of all the buttons. I couldn't do that with the mirrorless. I was doing this almost with the mirrorless and holding it this way. And it didn't feel as steady to me. Plus, the weight of a DSLR, for me personally, I think helps me hold the camera steadier because it's just a heavier thing. But that's not true for everybody. Some folks like a lighter camera. They have smaller hands. They want that compactness of a mirrorless camera. So I tell everybody, if you're thinking about buying any camera, DSLR or mirrorless, whatever it might be, go into a store, go into your local camera store, your local Best Buy, and feel and hold the camera. See if it feels good. If it has a grip that you feel comfortable with. By the way, if you do that, don't then go to Amazon and buy the damn camera. I rail about this all the time. I hate people who go into a camera store and the sales guy, who's probably working on commission, gives you all this information about this camera versus this camera, then you go away and buy it for $20 cheaper on Amazon. Don't do that. If it's half price, yes, buy it on Amazon. But if it's just $50 less, buy it from the guy in the store. Give that guy the money. So depending on your physicalness, you may want a smaller camera or you may want a bigger camera. For me, I like a bigger camera. The M1, you like the little M1. We took it to Australia with us, and you took some great shots in Australia. So mirrorless cameras generally are smaller and lighter. You may lose that advantage once you start putting on bigger lenses. If your camera only weighs half a pound, but your lens weighs 4 pounds, you kind of defeated the purpose of a mirrorless camera. We've talked about the optical viewfinder versus the electronic viewfinder. The other advantage of an electronic viewfinder is because you're not seeing what the lens sees, you're seeing what the sensor sees. When you make adjustments on the camera, you see it in the viewfinders. So if you want if you go to shoot and you look at it and you go, oh, it's too dark, and if a photo is too dark, what do I have to change to make it brighter?
You have to change the shutter speed to be longer.
Very good, IJ. Look at you. Or
I don't know.
Yes, you do. Starts with an A.
Well, the aperture. I don't know how you would change the aperture to increase light.
You'd make the aperture bigger. So you make a smaller aperture number. Remember the fraction?
Oh, yes.
So if you're shooting at f11 and it's a small thing and you find it's too dark, if you make it f4, you're opening up the aperture more so more light can come in.
Okay.
And then the third thing you would do is?
You could change the lighting from wherever you are.
True.
Wherever you are.
What does MacMan say in the...
MacMan says up the ISO. I don't even know what that is.
ISO is the last thing I teach people, the last thing I tell them to change. But ISO is a measure of the light sensitivity of your sensor. So if you make your sensor more sensitive to light, your picture will get brighter. All those things, when you're using a DSLR, you're guessing at. If I point at a shot and I look through my optical viewfinder, I can't tell that it's too dark. The numbers in the back of my camera might say that, but I can't see that it's too dark. But on a mirrorless camera, I can see on the back of the screen, it'll show a dark screen. So I know, oh, okay, I'll increase the shutter speed, or I'll increase the aperture, or I'll change, and you'll see those changes live on the screen because you're looking at what the sensor sees. When you change the sensor data, you can see it live, which is a very handy feature to have in some situations. But again, that's using battery life. If you're using that back screen a lot on your mirrorless camera, make sure you get multiple batteries, at least 2. When you buy your mirrorless camera, buy at least 2 extra batteries because you're going to need them, I promise. So that's the balancing act you do with optical viewfinders versus electronic viewfinders. The other big difference when it comes to mirrorless versus DSLR, and the differences have gotten a lot less, is autofocus. Generally speaking, and this is a price point thing, at the lower price point, the price point that beginners are going to shoot at, a DSLR will autofocus faster than a mirrorless camera. So when you push that, when you're looking at that thing and you push that shutter you push that shutter button and you half press it and it does that hunting for focus, it'll happen faster on a DSLR than it will on a mirrorless. But the speed is measured in milliseconds nowadays. It may not make a difference to you. If you're shooting things that are moving quickly, then yes, it'll make a difference to you. Or you're shooting things that are moving constantly. So you're shooting a horse race and the horses are going by and you want it to autofocus and track as it moves. A mirrorless camera may not be able to do that as fast as a DSLR. Now, the higher range mirrorless cameras have gotten very, very good at continuous autofocusing. Very, very good in lower light too. So it depends on the price point. If you're buying a base level mirrorless camera, base level camera and fast autofocus is what you're looking for, you may not want to get a low cost mirrorless camera. You want to bump your price point up a little bit. The image quality is pretty much nowadays any camera made in the last 2 years, 3 years, whether it be a mirrorless camera or a DSLR at the same price point, you're going to get good quality images. Don't worry about that. Don't think that mirrorless or DSLRs take better pictures than mirrorless. They really don't. The big differences nowadays are between manufacturers, between Canon and Sony and Nikon, not between mirrorless and DSLRs. You're going to get good pictures. If you know what you're doing, you're going to get good pictures out of both of those. Another issue that people mention but really isn't an issue anymore, startup. If I'm standing somewhere and something happens, I can turn my camera on. I can turn my camera on and be ready to shoot instantly. There's no what used to be called lag on startup lag. Point and shoot cameras back in the day would take 10 seconds from the time you turned it on to the time it went through its boot up process. Again, price point wise, the cheaper mirrorless cameras might take a little bit of time, but even nowadays the time is mentioned in seconds. Less than a second from the time you push that button to the time you take a shot. I will often leave my DSLR on. Actually, I just noticed behind me, this thing has been, the last time I used this was probably 2 weeks ago. It's been on for 2 weeks and the battery is still fine. So I don't generally, when I'm out shooting, ever turn my DSLR off. My mirrorless camera, I turn off after every shot. Just save battery life. That's how much battery drain there is on those things. Another issue is lenses. Because DSLRs have been around for a very, very, very long time, there's all kinds of lenses, both new and used, you can buy. There's a greater selection of lenses for DSLRs than there are for mirrorless cameras. But as a beginner, don't worry about lenses. It's not really a big issue. Until you learn what kind of shooter you are, the kit lens that you're shooting, the 1855 or a 70 to 200, whatever lens you bought when you bought the camera, is going to be good enough until you learn the ins and outs of photography. So don't worry about lens choice just yet. I've always told people your first camera, your first fancy camera, DSLR or mirrorless, won't be your last one. In 3, 4, 5 years, you'll get a new one. And that's when you might start worrying about lenses. An issue when I was doing research on this that I hadn't thought of before, that's come up in the last 3 or 4 years with cameras, is stabilization. You're standing there, you're holding your camera, and even your breathing is moving the camera just ever so slightly. So almost every camera manufacturer has stabilization of some kind. The iPhone has optical image stabilization. So do most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. The issue is where that stabilization happens. On a lot of DSLRs, Nikon and Canon included, the stabilization is built into the lens. So the lens mechanism on the inside of it notices you moving in one direction and it moves the lens in the other direction. It's imperceptible. You can't feel it. You don't notice it. But on a lot of mirrorless cameras, the stabilization is built into the body of the camera. There's good and bad points of that. The image stabilization on a lens is generally going to be better than on a body, but it means you're paying for stabilization for every single lens that you buy, even if you don't need it. On the body, it stays there, and you're paying for it just the one time on the body of the camera. Stabilization will also affect your battery life, because if it's on the body of the camera, it's got to be moving back and forth, and that's going to take up battery life. It's not a huge issue. More and more, actually, even the newer Nikons and Canons are moving towards body image stabilization, because it can be controlled more through software more easily than it can through the lenses. So that's may or may not be an issue for you. The biggest thing I find is the physical size of a mirrorless camera versus a DSLR. If you want to be incognito, you want to shoot street photos where you're not having this great big thing in front of your face, you want to travel and travel light. Dave D, when he went to Lisbon with us, he had just his small mirrorless camera. I think he only had one or two relatively small lenses, whereas I had this 4-pound monster I was carrying around with me on my hip most of the time, and that can get tiring after a while. It can take away some of the pleasure of shooting when you have this big thing that you're lugging around all the time. The next issue, and again, it may not be a big issue, when it comes to shooting video. A lot of folks, I think the camcorder market is dead. I haven't seen anyone using a dedicated camcorder to shoot video in years, because you're either shooting on your phone or you're shooting on your camera. In general, DSLRs, and this is kind of odd, are not very good at shooting video. Mirrorless, oddly enough, are quite good, even at the low range, when it comes to shooting video. One of the reasons is because of that autofocus. Because the nature of DSLRs, when you're shooting video, when you push the video record button, you can't change the focus. But you can on a mirrorless, because the mirrorless is doing it on the sensor. So you can change the focus on the sensor. Again, that may not be an issue that you need to worry about as a beginner, but it is something to think about. Maybe if you like shooting a lot of video and you're thinking about getting a camera that does double duty, shooting video and shooting pictures, maybe a mirrorless one would be good for you too. Any questions?
If I was a beginner photographer and I said to you, Mr. King, should I get a mirrorless or a DSLR? What should I do?
First thing I would say is, what do you normally shoot? What kind of shooter are you?
Okay.
Because if you like traveling, if you have small hands, if you don't want to spend $1,500, if you want something that's cheap and relatively easy to use, I'd say go with a mirrorless one.
Am I going to grow out of it quickly?
Hopefully, yes. Growing out of it quickly means you've learned a lot. But if you bought the camera today, you're not going to grow out of it, assuming your knowledge keeps up. You're not going to grow out of it for 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
You're going to have a very good camera that will allow you to take really good pictures for the next 2 or 3 years at the very least. So I think for a lot of folks, mirrorless is a better option than a full-size DSLR. But again, go into a store, feel the camera in the store, because that's, if it doesn't feel good, you're not going to take it with you. One of the reasons why I often didn't take the Olympus M1 was like, I'm going to be out all day and I don't want to be cramped with this stuff. It's another thing too, is because the bigger body on DSLRs allows them to put more buttons and more control on the back of the DSLR, on the top of the DSLR. Mirrorless cameras, because they're a lot smaller, they have to take a lot of these controls and put them in software in your menu, and that may be hard to get at in some things. For example, my exposure compensation on this is one button. You may not even know what that means. You may not care. But I can change things on the camera with the buttons on the back very, very simply, very, very easily. Whereas with the mirrorless camera, you may have to go into a menu to do that, and you may lose the shot because you're hunting around trying to find out how to change your ISO. As always, if you have any questions about this or anything else about photography, please send me an email. I'm happy to try to help you guys figure this stuff out. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the Your Mac Life Daily. Thank you very much to the nice folks in the IRC chat room who helped me come up with a better name for it. And it's now officially called the YMAL Daily. You can check it out at, let me just get the link up here. Where'd it go? I lost it. Oh, yml.me/yml daily. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I would appreciate that. We got our first advertiser. It's going to be showing up on Monday. Thank you very much. It'll be a surprise, so you'll be able to check it out. And thanks very much for all the support that folks have sent to me. Suggestions. Screwed up the very first day. Screwed up. Had the wrong date.
It's okay.
Doofus. And then today I had the font wrong.
Yeah, I looked at it and I said, "What happened to
yeah,
it?"
yeah, it's something. I'm still getting used to the software
That's all right.
that's sending it out
care.
there. Hopefully the information is good. Hopefully the information is what you guys are looking for.
Tell your friends.
I'm liking the newsletter a lot. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. MacMan has a good point. I'm certainly glad I took my DSLR to Lisbon. I also had my son's point and shoot, which I never used. Wish I would remembered it. I had it for when I was in a couple places in Notre Dame. I don't think you can definitively say, get this. It's different for every person and their needs and wants when it comes to photography. I would never say that, no, don't get a mirrorless, or no, don't get a DSLR. It's up to you and your shooting style. And that's where you have to ask questions. You have to ask questions of hopefully people like me to figure out what kind of shooting style you are. And one of the things I love doing with people is saying, I'll say to a beginner, well, what kind of photographer are you? And they'll say, I don't know. And I say, look at your phone. Look at the photos on your phone, and that'll tell you what kind of photographer you are. If all your shots are landscapes, then get a landscape camera.
Which would be?
It would be a wide angle lens on a DSLR or mirrorless.
Oh, either. Okay. So the lens, it sounds like, is the thing that makes the difference.
In that case, yes. And same with portraits. If you shoot a lot of portrait shots, then that's a different kind of camera and lens. You'd get a 85 millimeter lens.
What about if I say, I like to take pictures of everything, my family, some flowers, landscapes,
which is what most people do.
Yeah.
And then you get a basic DSLR, a basic mirrorless camera with one or two of the kit lenses. Learn how to use that thing and learn how to use it well. And then when you find yourself going, I know how to do this shot, my camera can't do it, that's when you upgrade. That's when you get a better lens. My friend Glenn in Toronto, his wife was asking advice with this, and Glenn likes nature photography. He likes shooting pictures of animals and birds in the woods. And I said, well, yeah, then get him a telephoto lens. You want a big zoom lens for that kind of thing. If you're a landscape shooter, you want a wide angle lens. So it depends on what you're shooting.
MacMan's asked you a question, though.
What's the question?
Do you get Lightroom through Creative Cloud or just by buying it?
I get it through, that's a good question, MacMan. I get it through Creative Cloud because it's a professional thing for me. It's $10 a month US. I think it's $13 Canadian. And I feel that I need Lightroom to do that stuff. But there's lots of other apps out there that don't have to be paid subscription-wise. Remember, you can also still get Lightroom as a standalone app for a little bit longer, not too much longer. I'm a big fan. I've posted about it in the newsletter. Skylum makes a couple of really good apps. Luminar is a neat one. There's Affinity Photo. There's a bunch of other apps out there that don't require a subscription model. So keep an eye out for some of those. Luminar is a great app for a beginner because it's drag and drop. There's not all the confusing elements of Luminar. You just put it in there and it does it all automatically for you. But the problem is you may not like the results, and it's hard to get very specific in your fixes when it comes to that kind of stuff. But for a ranked beginner, Luminar is a really good app. Got some emails from folks. Carl Richichi says, thanks for the conversation concerning Apple News Plus. Wife and I were so excited about Apple News Plus, we subscribed to the service on day one. Same day my wife took delivery of her new little white dual-motor Tesla 3. Show off. She attempted to set up Apple News Plus to only give her an Apple and Tesla newsfeed, but we immediately noticed a huge problem. We were unable to customize the daily newsfeed experience whatsoever. In fact, our daily feed was full of content with everything but what we were wanting.
Yep.
It was a stream of information from sources we knew nothing about and had no interest in.
Mm-hmm.
Kim Kardashian's makeup tips, Justin Bieber news, endless rubbish.
I so agree.
It felt very Apple Trendy Magazine Plus rather than anything news. My wife even went so far as to call Apple. After over an hour on the line with 3 reps, they were unable to customize her feed via the Apple rep, remoting into her iPad to set it up herself. It's unfortunate because our Google News feed each day only shows us what we want to have an interest in, and that's completely free. We do hope Apple gets this issue sorted soon, as the last thing users should experience is paying for a simple news feed that can't be customized. We're all too busy for distractions and noise in a simple news feed. That was exactly the problem that you and I had with it.
I felt exactly the same way that gentleman is describing.
We were getting a bunch of information that we didn't ask for, that we had, as I think I said in last week's show, News Plus was showing me articles and news from People Magazine and Runner Magazine, neither of which I've ever looked at. The only magazine that has to do with running is What to Do When Running While Being Chased by Someone Bigger Than You. That's the magazine I'll subscribe to, because that's the only chance I'm ever running. So it was annoying.
It was very tacky and annoying, and I was looking through it and I was thinking, I do not like this.
No.
I told you I don't like it.
And
I'm not interested.
You know, people say, well, do this, do this. No, I'm not spending $13 a month Canadian
Absolutely not.
to fight with your software.
I don't care.
So it'll do what I want it to do. What I'm going to set up for Melissa one of these days is a RSS, really simple syndication news feed. I'll show you how to do that, where you can get the kind of stuff that you're looking for Apple News from very specific sources, done in a way that's cheaper, it's free, but more customizable to what you want.
I liked getting the New York Times news.
Yep.
I did like that.
Our friend Scott Randall, hey, Shawn and Melissa, just finished listening to the archive of last week's show. So happy to hear you're starting a newsletter. I love the show, but also love reading articles, so this will be great. He says, do you think you might accept submissions of articles for publication? While at LimeMac, Long Island Macintosh User Group, I wrote lots of articles for their newsletter. It goes without saying that if you don't like the article, you don't include it. No, I don't see ever doing that, Scott. I don't see ever doing long-form news. It might be a separate newsletter, but this is a newsletter, a daily news thing. And I want it to be quick little news tidbits, a paragraph, 2 paragraphs that people can read real quick. Just read the headline and then move on if they have to. I'm not really interested, no offense to you, interested in any kind of long-form stuff. Now on to your talk with Jim, I completely agree. People just don't care about their own privacy. My conclusion on this, there are a lot of stupid people out there who never use Facebook or Twitter just for the privacy reasons. I do use LinkedIn, and that seems okay. If I ever decide to use Twitter, I can't ever imagine using Facebook, I'll do it very cautiously. Let me know if I can submit articles, but even if not, I'm interested in YML Daily. Thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate that. Yeah, as I've always said, Facebook and Twitter are what you make of them. If you decide not to give data to these people, they can get some of it, but we give up far too much information for far too little return. Twitter doesn't do it nearly as much as Facebook does, and Twitter is more controllable in the sense that you subscribe to people's Twitter feeds, and if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe from them. I hear people going, Twitter's just a cesspool. Well, then you follow a cesspool. It's your own fault. Unfollow people who piss you off. That's the easiest way to make. You can follow kitty cats and unicorns on Twitter and have the happiest Twitter feed in the world, if that's what you want to make of it. But if you follow just random people, angry people like me, you're going to get angry stuff in your Twitter feed. It's what you make of it. If you want happy news, just follow happy news. Jason Painter in Sydney, Australia, talking about the Apple Watch. The only model I haven't had is the Series 1. I've upgraded every year I've upgraded every year. For 2 years, I've kept the previous year's model, so currently I wear the Series 4 all day and the Series 3 at night, tracking sleep. That's very clever of him. I have ongoing fitness goals, which is the primary reason I've evoked this configuration. I could not imagine being without an Apple Watch. Thank you very much, Jason. It's an interesting point of view. Our friend Lauren Finkelstein says, on the show you were talking about TV and how people always hate shows about their own fields, lawyers hating law shows, that sort of thing. I believe the exception is The West Wing. Politicians seem to like that one. I think he's right. I think it was the only one that people... Well, Veep, too, interestingly, is also a political show. And you see a lot of politicians saying they like Veep, but they like it because they see other people in Veep. They never see themselves, but they see other people in Veep.
West Wing was quite brilliantly written, though, wasn't it?
Especially the first 4 seasons. The first 4 seasons were Aaron Sorkin writing it on, apparently, as it turned out, a cocaine-fueled binge. but they were really, really well
Very
written.
well written.
Great acting, and then also great direction.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also an interesting, when you look at it, take the big picture look at it, it was simply a workplace drama. That's all it was. It wasn't different from other shows set in workplaces. It just so happened to be of the president of the White House. So there's a lot of political stuff in there, but it was the interaction of a typical workplace drama. I loved it, and I'd love to watch it again. Folks, that's it for tonight's show. I want to say thanks very much to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop, of loopinsight.com, for being here each and every week, as he is legally mandated to do. That's why Jim can't get away from us. Thanks to you guys being tuned in, whether you're listening in live or tuned into the archive. If you want to check out the Daily, I hope you do, send me an email. I'll send you the direct link to subscribe to the Daily. And please pass the Daily along. The important thing for the Daily is to increase subscriber numbers. I need to goose subscriber numbers and get them above a certain level to get more advertising. So I would appreciate if you guys did that. And if you have any comments about the Daily, let me know. I'm always happy to hear comments from you folks. And if you want to chat on a daily basis, there is a YML Daily Slack channel that you can jump into during the day and chat to me. We were talking yesterday during the Apple earnings announcement, so we were in the Slack channel talking back and forth. I want to say thanks, as always, to my beautiful wife, Melissa.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The show wouldn't be the same without you. Actually, I wouldn't do the show without you.
He has said that, folks.
I wouldn't. When she's mad at me, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta get her not mad at me. We're gonna show good. Folks, that's it for tonight's show. As always, I've been Shawn King.
I'm Melissa King.
And you've been listening to Your Mac Life. See ya.
Bye.